This episode is co-funded by the European Union. Views and opinions expressed are, however, those of the author only and do not necessarily reflect those of the European Union. Neither the European Union or the granting authority can be held responsible for them. Hello and welcome to EURACTIV's Beyond the Byline podcast. I am Evi Kiori, and in this special episode of our podcast, our focus is on farmers. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen thanked EU's farmers in her State of the Union address on the 13th of September, expressing her appreciation for providing us with food day after day, highlighting, however, the need to move towards a more sustainable agriculture to protect Europe's nature. The same line was followed by EU's agriculture ministers during the Agrifish meeting on September 18th. Von der Leyen's message for more dialogue and less polarization in the agri-food policy debate was welcomed by farmers' organizations like Copa Cogeca, the Committee of Professional Agricultural Organizations, and CEJA, the Forum for Communication between Young Farmers and the European decision makers. The agricultural sector has weathered significant challenges in recent years, affecting not only farmers but also their workers, families and communities. Uncertainty looms from various sources, including volatile markets due to geopolitical factors, extreme weather events, regulatory changes and the inherent complexities of farming. The recent State of the Union address conveyed a crucial message, recognizing the vital role of farmers in society and expressing support for their efforts to produce food sustainably.
The sector has gone through serious hardships over the last years. Farmers, but also their workers and their families and communities, all have been impacted by uncertainty that is surrounding us.
Peeter Meedendorp is president of CEJA.
It comes from various sources: the increased volatility of the market due to geopolitical turbulence on which we have no control, the new climate normal with droughts, floods, hail, heavy rain. It's leaving us no moment to rest. The important regulatory changes, which are not always easy to grasp, and more generally, all the elements that make farming so complex every day. The State of the Union gave us an important signal. It said to farmers, for the first time in 4 years, perhaps even more, you're an important component of our society, and we want to help you achieve your objectives. And that's something we needed to hear, that we have backup in what we're trying to do for all of us, producing food in a sustainable way.
I think it's important to have not only in kind of pre-election times have a very close look on the whole agricultural and food system in Europe.
Karl Bauer is chairman of Copa Cogeca.
The whole food chain gives us food security. Food security is that important besides food safety. And as we have seen it in the last years, the COVID crisis, the inflation beginning, the consequences of the Russian invasion, how important it is for Europe as a strategic question to have food security. And that's the first step to get into contact with the whole food chain. And it starts with talking with agricultural people, with farmers and women in the farm, and not only talking about them.
While ecological sustainability is undeniably vital, overlooking the economical and social facets can lead to dire consequences, potentially jeopardizing farming.
It all starts with 3 equal pillars of sustainability. Sometimes we had a kind of impression that in the last discussions we were talking very much about ecological dimension of sustainability, which is important. But on the other hand, if doesn't have the both other pillars, we will get big problems. We see it where especially the economic sustainability is not given, that it leads at the end of the day to a kind of giving up the farming, and which leads us to no other efforts and no other outcomes. And that's why it's so important to have this overview look. And this is what is for the next time the first address equal conditions between the three pillars of sustainability. And farmers in general are very much interested in these three pillars in equal. It's quite simple. Usually, farming in Europe is diverse. We have different conditions, but there is one thing that links all of us, which means that we are using in general our land for production, which is not inherited by our parents, but it's a kind of being leased by our children, because we need to conserve best conditions for the future, especially for young people to challenge these new conditions and to lead them to a successful coming into the food chain system.
Farming's core challenge is harmonizing food production with ecosystem services and climate change mitigation. Young farmers need support in the form of knowledge investment and stable land access, while the European Commission's signal is promising. Farmers must now focus on policy tools and address potential short-term challenges from environmental legislation to sustain the next generation.
Agriculture has always been about working with nature, and it's a very humbling task. Our challenge as farmers is to provide food, but it's also fiber, feed, and energy, and it's the first element that constitutes farming. But we also have to do so while delivering ecosystem services and adapting to and mitigating climate change. To make it all work together with our natural environment can be challenging, but we're willing to do it. But we need uh, some enabling instruments to tackle all these challenges at once: knowledge, investment, stable access to land, those elements that are needed for young farmers. The signal sent by this European Commission is a good first step in that direction. Now we need to see how to make it work from a policy perspective, what tools are necessary, how to implement them, and also important is to acknowledge that sometimes there are short-term negative effects of environmental legislation on the social economic position of young farmers. If we do so, we can evaluate what to do about this. If we fail to do so, this will result consequently in the number of young farmers further declining.
Although farmers appear committed to fostering discussion on the multifaceted impact of extreme weather, including economic, social, and environmental aspects, they are concerned about the lack of attention to risk and crisis management tools in the recent CAP reforms.
For us, it's very important to create spaces of discussion on the impact of extreme weather, covering all aspects of it: economic, social, and environmental. During the last CAP reform, for example, CEJA raised already the importance of risk and crisis management instruments. Unfortunately, in our opinion, the topic was not visible on the agenda, despite its vital importance for our sector. We need to have an open discussion on what is working and what is not. We know, for example, that the Council is opening new reflections on the crisis reserve. We are going to follow these reflections with interest, but well, we also need to look at other tools available on the market and the fact that private instruments have their own limitations. Besides risk management tools, we need to look at the contribution of EU policy to climate adaptation. As you might know, an ex ante report on the CAP strategic plan will come out the end of October. It will give us an overview of what is exactly in the programming of member states when it comes to the CAP strategic plans. And we will take up these reflections from here, because then we will know what is not in the strategic plans in terms of climate adaptation.
While farmers welcome the Council's recognition of holistic rural development, it's imperative to discuss synergies with other funds like cohesion policy for sustainable infrastructure. Achieving better coherence between EU, national and regional policies is vital, as the CAP alone cannot address all rural development challenges.
It has been quite key for our organizations because young farmers in agriculture need adequate living conditions. The Council is finally acknowledging the importance to have a holistic approach to rural areas, and above all, the importance for the EU. We find it a great sign, despite it coming over the 2 years after the publication of the vision. From our perspective, certain aspects need to be further discussed. Synergies to create with other funds, especially the cohesion policy, which could support more sustainable infrastructure and services in rural areas, but also to a greater extent, how to create better coherence between EU, national and regional policies addressing rural development.
Technical innovations play a pivotal role, including the development of new methods and breeding practices.
I think there is also a clear ranking when it comes to answers dealing with weather extremes, with climate change in general. And this ranking starts with keeping production alive, which is the most important one. Only if we succeed in keeping our production alive, we will have this sovereignty, we will have food security. The second step for me is to compensate if it comes to losses. And the third one is reducing financial missings. And the next steps are more technical, which when it comes, for example, to develop new methods or alternatives, or when it comes to breeding or something like this.
So there is no doubt. Farmers and cooperatives are vital for rural development, but they face challenges like generational renewal and administrative burdens. Coordinated policies and funds are needed to support sustainable agriculture with fair income, economic viability, and innovation. This approach also emphasizes farmers' roles in supply chains and knowledge sharing while addressing funding issues amidst inflation rates.
It was clear that farmers and cooperatives are absolutely relevant and important for rural areas and the development of rural areas. There won't be a successful development if we do not have them both, farmers and cooperatives. I think this is out of any doubt. And also there are some challenges like demographic challenges, the generational renewal, but not only this one. I think there was a consensus in a need for a holistic strategy and a coordination between policies and also between funds supporting these policies. As I mentioned before, and I think it's based clearly on the Article 39 of the treaty, what is the role of the agriculture, what is the part, and it comes to a sustainable agriculture with 3 equal pillars, with a fair income of all participants of the food chain, with economic viability of farms and innovation support and productivity supported by competitiveness. That's a very important part. Another part comes to the role of the farmers in the supply chain and to support short supply chains whenever it's possible to get a close link between producers and consumers. It's easier to transfer not only the product but also the knowledge and the whole system linked to the production.
And the ultimate goal is nurturing a well-functioning common market system, one that addresses societal challenges and demands while providing unified responses, especially in the realm of the food chain. And farmers are eagerly awaiting the Commission's details on the strategic dialogue, structure and mandates, embodying a shared vision for agriculture that transcends individual interests.
Referring back to the State of the Union, I think the willingness of dialogue is a very important one to underline. In CEJA, we always have made dialogue with policymakers and stakeholders one of our core values throughout our sustainability agenda, but even before when discussing the common agricultural policy. We may sometimes disagree, but we all go out for new inspirations and new ideas to take action. Moreover, we're really looking forward to hear from the Commission about how the strategic dialogue with the agricultural sector will be constructed and what the mandate of the Commission is, but also the mandate of the other actors in this dialogue. As we think dialogue is not just a talk, it's a commitment to a shared vision on agriculture, which gets beyond the individual interests.
And that's all for this week. I am Evi Chiori, and this was EURACTIV's Beyond the Byline podcast. Visit EURACTIV to stay on top of the latest news, sign up to our podcast newsletter, and if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, you can do so on your favorite podcasting app. Thank you for tuning in, and until next week.